A medieval monk stares in despair at a book written in a language that does not exist. For centuries, his frustration was our own. We were surrounded by the silent relics of the past, their stories locked away, their secrets guarded by time. But then, a new kind of magic arrived. It was not sorcery, but science. This is a journey through 25 times that modern detective work, from forensic archaeology to artificial intelligence, cracked the codes and solved the greatest puzzles of the medieval world. By the end, you will see history not as a collection of dusty legends, but as a crime scene waiting for the right clues. We will discover how a king's flagship really sank, what a screaming mummy is actually telling us, and why an entire Viking settlement simply vanished. What forgotten mystery from the past do you think is most deserving of a scientific investigation? That book was the Voynich Manuscript. For more than 600 years, its very existence seemed to defy logic. Imagine a volume filled with page after page of elegant, looping script that no one on Earth could read, accompanied by illustrations of plants that have never grown, intricate astronomical diagrams of unknown constellations, and strange, nude women bathing in what appears to be a system of green, interconnected pools. It was discovered in the early 20th century by a rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich, but carbon dating later placed its vellum in the early 15th century. From that moment, it became the ultimate puzzle, attracting and defeating the finest cryptographers in the world, including codebreakers from both world wars. They all left empty-handed, some driven to obsession. The text resisted every known method of analysis, leading many to conclude it was an elaborate, meaningless hoax. The mystery seemed permanent, a beautiful artifact of pure nonsense, but science does not accept permanent mysteries. In the last decade, researchers turned the full force of computational linguistics and artificial intelligence upon the manuscript. Instead of searching for a known language, they fed its symbols into algorithms designed to detect underlying patterns, statistical fingerprints of genuine language structure. And they found them. The text possesses a complexity and internal logic inconsistent with a random forgery. It follows linguistic rules like Zipf's law, which governs word frequency in natural languages. This was the first major clue it was saying something real. The most compelling breakthrough came from applying these AI models to historical language families. One persistent theory, supported by algorithmic analysis, suggests the manuscript may be a coded treatise on women's health and herbalism, written in a highly abbreviated and cipher-modified form of Old Turkish. The strange plants could be stylized medicinal herbs, the bathing diagrams perhaps representations of balneotherapy or therapeutic baths, and the astronomical sections might relate to astrology used in medieval medicine. While a complete word-for-word translation remains elusive, the application of artificial intelligence has shifted the consensus dramatically. We are no longer staring at an impenetrable wall of gibberish. We are looking at a deliberately constructed, likely scientific document, its code now partially broken. The world's most mysterious book has begun to whisper its first faint secrets. From a book of unreadable secrets, we move to a house of endless doors. In San Jose, California, stands a Victorian mansion so vast and nonsensical, it feels like a physical manifestation of a troubled mind. The Winchester Mystery House has 7 stories, over 160 rooms, 10,000 windows, and staircases that lead directly into ceilings. For over a century, the story was simple and chilling. Sarah Winchester, heiress to the Winchester rifle fortune, was told by a spiritualist medium that she was haunted by the ghosts of everyone killed by the Winchester rifle. To appease them and avoid death herself, she had to build a home for them, and construction must never, ever stop. So from 1884 until her death in 1922, carpenters worked 24 hours a day, hammering and sawing in a perpetual, chaotic frenzy to confuse the vengeful spirits. It is a perfect ghost story, but like the Voynich Manuscript, the truth uncovered by historians and engineers is far more human and compelling. Architectural analysis of the building plans and payroll records tells a different tale. Construction was not constant. It occurred in distinct phases, often halting for years during economic downturns or Sarah's travels to Europe. The famed round-the-clock shifts are a myth. The payroll shows standard working hours. So what was she really doing? Structural engineers examining the house see not random chaos, but a wealthy, curious, and deeply grieving woman acting as her own experimental architect. Many of the bizarre features have logical, if eccentric, explanations. Staircases with steps just 2 inches high likely accommodated Sarah's severe arthritis. Doors opening onto blank walls often once led to balconies or wings that were later remodeled. She was fascinated by the number 13, incorporating it everywhere, not for ghosts but as a personal numerological quirk. The endless additions. She had a vast fortune with no heirs and a profound interest in the craftsman movement and spiritualism, which was a common, accepted philosophy of the era, not a sign of madness. The construction provided purpose, community for her workers, and a complex, absorbing project to manage her immense grief over the loss of her husband and infant daughter. Science and history peeled back the ghost story to reveal not a woman haunted by specters, but one navigating loss with the tools she had: wealth, curiosity, and an endless supply of timber and nails. Her mansion was not a prison for spirits, but a sanctuary for a broken heart. Grief built a mansion of doors, but pride sank a king's greatest warship. On a calm July afternoon in 1545, King Henry VIII stood on the shores of Portsmouth, England, watching his naval fleet engage the French. His favorite vessel, the Piri Reis, a majestic warship that had served him for 34 years, executed a sharp turn to fire its broadside cannons. Then, before the horrified eyes of thousands on shore, it simply keeled over. Water rushed into its lower decks, and within minutes, the Piri Reis vanished beneath the Solent Channel, taking over 400 men with her. For centuries, the cause was accepted as a simple tragedy of war, a lucky shot from a French cannon. But when marine archaeologists raised the ship's twisted hull from the seabed in 1982, they brought a 400-year-old crime scene into the laboratory. The debate was fierce. Was it enemy action or a fatal error by the English crew? The ship itself held the evidence. Forensic analysis began with the structure. The Piri Reis had been recently modified, retrofitted with heavier, more modern guns. By studying the placement of these guns and the ship's weight distribution, scientists created digital models. They discovered the modifications had made the vessel dangerously top-heavy, raising its center of gravity. Then they examined the crew remains, finding a startling number of archers with their longbows, suggesting a large complement of soldiers were crowded on the upper decks during the engagement, adding even more unstable weight. The final clue was found in the hull's gun ports. For the new cannons to fire, the lowest row of gun ports had to be cut perilously close to the waterline. On that fateful day, with the ship overloaded and top-heavy, it executed that sharp turn. A sudden gust of wind, common in the Solent, would have pushed the already unstable vessel further onto its side. In that critical moment, those open lower gun ports dipped below the surface. The sea did not need a cannonball to breach the hull. It poured directly through the king's own innovation. Science painted a picture not of a single villain, but a cascade of small factors, a deadly recipe of naval ambition, poor design, and a gust of wind at the worst possible second. The Piri Reis sank not by French fire, but by a perfect storm of human decisions, finally heard in the silent testimony of its timbers and bones. The silent testimony of sunken timber gave us answers, but some historical whispers demand a voice from the grave. In the Tower of London, during the tumultuous summer of 1483, a political drama turned into one of England's most enduring mysteries. Two boys, 12-year-old King Edward V and his 9-year-old brother Richard, were placed in the tower for their protection by their uncle, the Lord Protector. They were seen playing in the courtyard, and then they were never seen again. Their uncle was crowned King Richard III shortly after. The grim assumption, popularized by Tudor historians and later by Shakespeare, was that Richard had the princes smothered in their sleep to secure his throne. For centuries, it was a tale of pure villainy, but also one without proof. The historical accounts were wildly conflicting, written by the victors who had every reason to paint Richard as a monster. Were the boys even dead? Had they been secretly spirited away? The rumor mill of history offered no clear verdict. Then, in 1674, during renovations at the tower, workmen made a ghastly discovery beneath a stone staircase. They found a wooden chest containing the skeletons of two children. They were believed to be the princes and were given a royal reburial, but without any scientific confirmation, doubt lingered. Could they be from another, older period? Modern science was finally allowed to examine the remains in the 1930s, and again with more advanced tools in the 1990s. Radiocarbon dating placed the bones firmly in the correct historical window, the latter half of the 15th century. Detailed anatomical analysis confirmed they were two children, one around 11 or 12, the other around 9 or 10, matching the princes' ages exactly. The bone structure even suggested a close familial relationship. The science was conclusive. These were the remains of the two boys, and they died around the time of their disappearance. But here, science reached its limit. The bones showed no clear signs of violence, no telltale cut marks or fractures, though the delicate neck bones of the younger child were missing, leaving cause of death uncertain. What forensic analysis did do was dramatically narrow the window of opportunity. The princes died in or shortly after 1483. This rules out later pretenders to the throne who claim to be one of the brothers, and it places the responsibility squarely on those in power during that specific fraught period. While it cannot point a finger at a single individual, it transforms the mystery from a vague legend into a specific crime with a known time frame, turning whispered accusations into a silent, skeletal indictment of that violent summer. A silent indictment from a royal tomb gives way to a sacred image from a holy sepulchre. Perhaps no single artifact has ignited more fervent debate between faith and science than the Shroud of Turin. For millions, this 14-foot length of linen, bearing the faint, haunting imprint of a crucified man, is not a medieval relic but the actual burial cloth of Jesus Christ, a divine photograph of the resurrection itself. Its history is a shadowy journey, emerging clearly in the 1300s in France before finding its home in Turin, Italy. The image, a detailed negative that only reveals its full, startling clarity when photographed, seems to defy explanation. How could a medieval forger create a perfect photographic negative centuries before the invention of photography? The mystery fueled devotion and skepticism in equal measure for generations. To settle the debate, science needed a direct, unambiguous test. In 1988, with the Vatican's permission, a groundbreaking project was launched. Researchers carefully removed a postage stamp-sized sample from a corner of the shroud. This sample was then divided and sent, under strict blind protocols, to 3 of the world's most prestigious independent laboratories at the University of Oxford, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Their mission was to perform radiocarbon dating, a technique that measures the decay of carbon-14 in organic material to determine its age. The results, published in the journal Nature in 1989, were definitive and unanimous. All 3 labs independently concluded that the linen of the Shroud of Turin dated from between 1260 and 1390 AD. This placed its creation firmly in the medieval period, approximately 1300 years after the crucifixion. The scientific consensus was clear: the shroud was a medieval artifact. This finding explained its historical appearance in the 1300s and suggested it was likely created as an object of veneration, possibly through a now-forgotten technique involving a bas-relief and sunlight. While some groups continue to debate the findings, suggesting possible contamination or later repairs, subsequent scientific reviews have upheld the original dating. The mystery for science is largely solved, yet the shroud endures, a powerful testament to a different kind of truth, the human need to touch the divine, a need so strong it inspired an unknown artisan centuries ago to create an image that would forever blur the line between faith and fact. Faith crafted an image, but genius built a machine. In the spring of 1901, sponge divers working off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon a Roman-era shipwreck littered with marble statues and bronze artifacts. Among the treasures was a lump of corroded greenish metal about the size of a large book. It seemed like junk, a piece of the ship's fittings perhaps, and it was catalogued and largely forgotten for nearly 50 years. But this unassuming lump was about to become the most disruptive object in the history of science. When a researcher finally brushed away the centuries of sea crust, he saw something impossible, the faint outline of a gear wheel. In a world believed to be technologically primitive, a precision gear was an anachronism, a ghost from a future that should not have existed. For decades, the Antikythera Mechanism, as it became known, was an enigma wrapped in corrosion. Scholars could see only fragments of its interior, and theories ranged from a navigational device to an astrological calculator. The truth was locked inside, invisible to the naked eye. The key to unlocking it was not a better magnifying glass, but a new way of seeing. At the turn of the 21st century, a team of scientists from the United Kingdom and Greece employed a powerful combination of advanced imaging techniques. They used high-resolution X-ray tomography, a process similar to a medical CT scan, to peer through the layers of calcified debris without damaging the fragile fragments. This data was then used to construct precise three-dimensional digital models. Suddenly, the ghost in the machine materialized. The scans revealed an astonishingly complex clockwork universe. They mapped over 30 finely cut bronze gears, some with teeth less than a millimeter wide, all meticulously arranged within a wooden frame. Inscriptions previously unreadable were decoded, serving as a user's manual etched in bronze. The mechanism was not a single tool, but a miniature cosmos. By turning a hand crank on the side, a series of interlocking gears would move dials on the front and back faces, predicting the positions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets with remarkable accuracy. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses, track the cycles of the Olympic Games, and even account for the moon's irregular orbit. It was, in essence, an analog computer of breathtaking sophistication, a mechanical representation of the heavens as understood by ancient Greek astronomers. Its creation around 200 BC rewrites our entire understanding of technological history. This level of precision engineering and astronomical knowledge would not be seen again in Europe until the great cathedral clocks of the 14th century, a gap of over 1,500 years. The Antikythera Mechanism solved its own mystery, not with a whispered legend, but with the silent, elegant logic of its gear teeth, proving that the ancient world harbored sparks of genius we are only now beginning to fully comprehend. That analog computer was a marvel of ancient engineering, but across the Atlantic, another mystery was written not in bronze gears, but in a single cryptic word. In 1587, a group of 117 English men, women, and children landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Their governor, John White, sailed back to England for supplies, but war with Spain delayed his return for 3 long years. When he finally made it back in 1590, the settlement was utterly deserted. The houses had been carefully dismantled, not destroyed, and there were no signs of a struggle. The only clue was a single word carved into a fort post, Croatoan, and the letters Cerbero carved into a nearby tree. The lost colony had simply evaporated. For centuries, the dominant theories were grim, either a brutal massacre by hostile tribes or a desperate, failed attempt to sail home that ended in shipwreck. The word Croatoan was the name of a friendly Native American group living on what is now Hatteras Island, but did it signal an attack or a destination? Modern science has reframed the entire investigation, treating the vanished settlement not as a ghost story, but as a complex environmental and social puzzle. The first clue came from dendrochronology, the study of tree rings. Analysis of ancient bald cypress trees from the region revealed that the late 1580s were the driest years in 8 centuries, a period of extreme, sustained drought known as a megadrought. This climatic catastrophe would have made agriculture nearly impossible for the unprepared English colonists, creating an immediate crisis of survival. They would have been desperate for food and alliance. This is where archaeology enters. Instead of focusing solely on the empty Roanoke site, researchers used LiDAR, a laser mapping technology that can see through forest canopy to reveal hidden ground formations. These surveys, combined with re-examinations of period maps drawn by John White himself, pointed to potential inland relocation sites. One key map even had a tiny paper patch covering a symbol that, when examined with X-ray fluorescence, revealed a possible fort location 50 miles inland. The most compelling evidence, however, comes from artifacts found far from the coast. On Hatteras Island, the historical home of the Croatoan people, archaeologists have uncovered a mix of English and Native American items from the correct period, including a slate writing tablet, pieces of a gun, and a gold signet ring. More tellingly, at an inland site near the Albemarle Sound, excavations have yielded European pottery, metal tools, and weapon parts that appear to have been integrated into a Native American village. The scientific narrative that emerges is one of adaptation, not annihilation. Facing a crippling drought, the colonists likely did what the carving suggested. They split into smaller groups. Some may have gone to live with the Croatoan on the coast. Others, perhaps following earlier plans, moved inland to seek help from other allied tribes. Over time, they would have intermarried and been absorbed into the communities, their English goods becoming part of a new, blended material culture. Later European accounts from the 1600s support this, with multiple reports from Jamestown settlers of gray-eyed Native Americans in the interior who spoke of ancestors who could speak English and read from a book. The lost colony was never truly lost. It faded from history because its people ceased to be English colonists and became something else, survivors who traded their crumbling fort for a place within a new world, their story not etched in a lonely post but woven into the very fabric of a changing land. The story of Roanoke is one of absorption, of people fading into a new landscape, but some stories are preserved with horrifying clarity, their final moments frozen for millennia. Across the windswept peat bogs of northern Europe, from Ireland to Denmark, a different kind of discovery has surfaced. These are the bog bodies, not skeletons but complete human forms, their skin tanned to dark leather by the acidic, oxygen-poor water, their facial expressions often eerily intact. They look like they could have died yesterday, yet they are over 2,000 years old. For generations, their discovery sparked macabre folklore and simple theories. Perhaps these were unlucky travelers who fell in and drowned, or victims of common crime. But the sheer number of them and the strange circumstances of their burials hinted at something far more deliberate. The bogs were not graves of convenience, they were chosen. The mystery was not just who they were, but why they were offered to the swamp. Modern forensic science has turned these ancient corpses into detailed police reports. The first step is a non-invasive look inside. Using CT scans, researchers can examine bones and internal structures without damaging the preserved tissue. This reveals age-old injuries and signs of disease, but the true revelations come from closer chemical inspection. Isotopic analysis of bones and teeth acts as a lifelong dietary passport. The chemical signatures locked in these tissues tell scientists what a person ate and drank over decades, revealing whether they came from a local area or had traveled from afar, and even indicating their social status based on the quality of their diet. One of the most intimate windows, however, is the stomach. In several bog bodies, the last meal is preserved in stunning detail. Scientists have identified specific grains like barley and flax, wild seeds, and even traces of a kind of gruel or porridge. This final supper is not random. It often contains ingredients available only at a specific time of year, pinning the time of death to a particular season, possibly linked to a festival or harvest. Then there is the cause of death. The bodies themselves bear silent, brutal testimony. Many show clear signs of violent, ritualized killing. Lindo Man, found in England, suffered a triple execution, a heavy blow to the head, a thin garrote tightened around his neck to strangle him, and his throat cut for good measure. The Gråbøl Man from Denmark had his throat slit from ear to ear. Toland Man, perhaps the most famous, was hanged with a braided leather noose still around his neck, his face etched in a peaceful expression that belies his violent end. The pattern is undeniable. These were not casual murders. The overkill, the specific methods, and the careful placement in the bog, a liminal space between land and water, point directly to ritual sacrifice. The forensic evidence paints a vivid, chilling portrait. These individuals, often young men in good health, sometimes with well-groomed hands suggesting they were not laborers, were chosen. They ate a special final meal. Then they were killed in a prescribed ceremonial manner and offered to the gods of the bog, perhaps to ensure fertility, victory in battle, or to maintain the cosmic order. Science has stripped away the folk tales, replacing them with a stark understanding of Iron Age spirituality, where the boundary between life and death was maintained by the ultimate offering. The bog bodies reveal a faith rooted in earth and sacrifice, but another ancient culture is often credited with harnessing a power far more modern. Deep within the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, a curious stone carving has sparked one of the most persistent alternative history theories of our time. The relief shows a large, bulbous object, elongated like a giant pear, with a snake-like filament winding inside it. This object appears to be held aloft on a pillar by a priest, while a box-like base is connected by a cable to a figure that some interpret as an energy source. To the modern eye, the resemblance is uncanny. It looks for all the world like an ancient Egyptian light bulb. This image has become a cornerstone of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, the idea that extraterrestrial visitors provided advanced technology to early civilizations. Proponents argue the Egyptians could not have illuminated their deep, windowless tombs and temples with mere torches or oil lamps, which would have consumed oxygen and left soot. They needed electric light, and this carving, they claim, is the schematic. It is a compelling visual mystery, but one that evaporates under the direct light of actual Egyptology. Archaeologists and linguists approach the carving not as an isolated sci-fi artifact, but as one panel in a vast, interconnected narrative covering the temple walls. The first clue is context. The so-called light bulb is not in a technical manual. It is surrounded by unmistakable religious iconography, gods, goddesses, and hieroglyphic texts. The snake emerging from the lotus flower is a well-established symbol in Egyptian art, representing the moment of creation. According to the myth, before the universe existed, a primordial lotus flower emerged from the watery chaos. As its petals opened, the sun god was born, bringing light into the world. The snake is a symbol of divine power and emergence. The carving at Dendera is a direct illustration of this very story. The bulbous shape is not a glass enclosure, but the blossoming lotus bud itself. The snake inside is the deity, often the god Hapi, associated with the Nile's annual flood and fertility being born from it. The pillar is a stylized stem, and the jed pillar base, a symbol of stability, represents the fertile earth from which the lotus grows. The connecting cable is not a wire, but a serpentine line of energy, a common artistic convention for depicting life force. This interpretation is not a guess. It is confirmed by the hieroglyphs literally carved right next to the image, which describe the scene in religious terms. Furthermore, Egyptologists point to countless other examples of the lotus and snake motif across Egyptian art, none of which are ever associated with lighting technology. The practical argument about soot in tombs has also been debunked by experiment. Replicas of ancient Egyptian lamps using specific wicks and fuels like sesame oil burn cleanly with minimal smoke. Mirrors of polished copper could effectively reflect and amplify this light. The mystery of the dendera light was never a technological puzzle. It was a cultural and linguistic one, created by viewing a sacred symbol through a modern lens and stripping it of all its original meaning. Science, in the form of rigorous archaeology and comparative mythology, solved it by simply reading the instructions left beside the picture. A sacred symbol carved in stone gives way to a drawing on a planetary scale. High on the arid plateaus of southern Peru, the earth itself holds a secret. From ground level, the Nazca Desert is a plain of reddish-brown pebbles, scorched by the sun and swept by wind. But ascend into the sky and the land transforms. Etched into the desert floor are hundreds of enormous geoglyphs, lines and shapes so vast they can only be comprehended from the air. There are geometric trapezoids stretching for miles, perfect triangles and spirals. Then there are the figures, a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider, a monkey with a coiled tail, and a strange humanoid figure nicknamed the astronaut. These creations are monumental, some over 1,200 feet long, yet they were made by simply removing the dark surface stones to reveal the lighter soil beneath. For decades, their purpose was the ultimate mystery. How could a people without flight create art they could never see? The most famous theory, popularized in the 1960s, proposed they were landing strips or navigation markers for ancient astronauts, alien visitors who needed clear runways from the sky. Others suggested they were a giant astronomical calendar, aligning with stars or solstice sunrises. The truth, uncovered not by looking to the stars, but by studying the Earth with 21st century tools, is far more human and urgent. Modern archaeology armed the investigation with new eyes. Satellite imagery and geographic information system mapping allowed researchers to catalog every line with unprecedented precision, analyzing their relationships to each other and the landscape. Ground-penetrating radar peered beneath the surface to understand the construction methods. This data revealed a critical pattern. The lines are not random. They overwhelmingly converge on points where subterranean water sources, aquifers, emerge at the surface or where ancient irrigation canals began. In one of the driest places on Earth, the lines literally point to water. Furthermore, analysis of pottery shards and settlement ruins found along the pathways shows they were not deserted. They were used. Archaeologists now believe the Nazca Lines were ritual pathways walked by people during ceremonies to honor deities responsible for fertility and water. The act of walking the lines was a form of prayer, a communal effort to maintain the delicate balance between life and desert. The giant animal figures are likely representations of spirit animals or constellations believed to influence the arrival of water. The mystery of their creation is also solved by simple archaeology. By studying the piles of removed stones at the edges of the lines, researchers confirmed the Nazca people used basic surveying techniques, likely with ropes and stakes, to create the large geometric forms. The more complex animal figures could have been scaled up from small sketches using a grid system. They did not need to see the final product from above. They needed only faith and a shared plan, walking the paths in ritual to feel their power from the ground. The lines were not messages for gods in the sky, but a desperate, beautiful dialogue with the earth itself, a prayer for survival etched into the very skin of the desert. The desert's vast prayers for water find an echo in a jungle's declaration of power. Scattered across the river deltas of southern Costa Rica, nestled among banana plantations and tangled rainforest, lie hundreds of near-perfect stone spheres. They range from the size of a melon to colossal orbs over 6 feet in diameter, weighing more than 15 tons. Their surfaces are unnervingly smooth, their shapes so geometrically precise that when first uncovered in the 1930s, they seem to defy the capabilities of the indigenous cultures known to have lived there. The immediate theories were as grand as they were speculative. Were they navigational aids for lost Atlanteans, celestial markers placed by ancient astronauts? Perhaps they were the cause of some forgotten anti-gravity device. Their perfection felt alien, a puzzle piece from a different, more advanced history. But as with so many of these enigmas, the truth lay not in lost continents, but in the patient work of trowels and microscopes. Systematic archaeological excavation around the spheres provided the first crucial clues. They were not found in isolation, but in clear association with the settlements and plazas of pre-Columbian chiefdoms, dating from around 600 AD up to the Spanish conquest. They were placed in alignments leading to the houses of chiefs, arranged in geometric patterns in central courtyards, and even set in lines that might have marked astronomical directions. This context alone ruled out Atlantean architects firmly planting the spheres within a known human timeline. But how were they made? Geological analysis provided the definitive answer. The spheres are carved from a local stone called granodiorite, a hard but workable igneous rock. Using modern scanning technology, researchers could detect the subtle tool marks still present on some spheres, revealing the method. The ancient craftsmen first identified large boulders with the right composition. They would then shape the rough sphere by patiently pecking at the surface with other, harder stones. Once the general form was achieved, the real work began. They used a combination of grinding with sand and water as an abrasive and the controlled application of heat. By building fires against specific areas of the stone and then rapidly cooling them with water, they could cause thin layers of the rock to flake off, a technique known as thermal spalling. This allowed for fine, controlled shaping. Finally, they would polish the sphere to its legendary smoothness using leather and fine abrasives over what must have been hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of labor. The mystery of their creation was solved not by invoking aliens, but by recognizing immense human skill and patience. Their purpose, deduced from their placement, was almost certainly social and ceremonial. In the hierarchical societies of the Diquis Delta, these spheres were ultimate status symbols. The size and perfection of a chieftain's spheres directly reflected his power, wealth, and ability to command labor. They were territorial markers, statements of authority carved in everlasting stone. They may have also held cosmological significance, representing celestial bodies or concepts of perfection and unity. The spheres were not messages for the stars, but very earthly proclamations of prestige, a culture's way of making its mark on the world in the most enduring form imaginable. Power carved in stone gives way to a whisper of electricity from a clay pot. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq sits a small, unassuming artifact that has sparked one of the most heated debates in archaeological history. Known as the Baghdad Battery, it consists of a 5-inch tall terracotta jar dating from the Parthian period around 200 BC to 200 AD. Inside, a copper cylinder sealed at the bottom with asphalt holds a single iron rod. When it was discovered in the 1930s, a German archaeologist proposed a startling hypothesis. If the jar were filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, the interaction between the dissimilar metals and the electrolyte could produce a small electrical charge. The idea was electrifying in every sense. Could this be proof of ancient knowledge of electroplating? perhaps used to gild statues. The image of a Parthian artisan using a primitive battery to apply a thin layer of gold is irresistibly modern. But does the evidence support the spark? The scientific method demands we test the hypothesis against all available data. First, the proponents point to the basic chemistry. The setup is, in theory, a classic galvanic cell. The iron rod would act as an anode, the copper cylinder as a cathode, and any acidic liquid as the electrolyte, generating a potential difference of about 1 volt. Several replicas built by researchers have indeed produced a small, measurable current, enough to create a faint tingle or, over a long period, to electroplate a small object. This is the tantalizing possibility, yet the counter-arguments from archaeologists and materials scientists are robust and grounded in context. The first major hole in the battery theory is the complete absence of any associated electrical paraphernalia. No wires, no conductors, no electroplated artifacts from the period that cannot be explained by simpler fire gilding techniques have ever been found. If this was a widespread technology, where is the rest of the circuit? The second is a practical problem of corrosion. Experiments show that using an acidic electrolyte would have rapidly dissolved the iron rod, leaving clear corrosive damage. The surviving iron rods in these jars show only typical rust from centuries in the ground, not the aggressive pitting that a sustained electrochemical reaction would cause. So if it was not a battery, what was its purpose? The most widely accepted explanation, drawn from contextual analysis of similar finds, is far more mundane but culturally significant. Archaeologists note that the jar was found alongside others containing sacred scrolls made of organic material, like papyrus or parchment. The copper cylinder would have served as a protective case for a rolled scroll, with the iron rod acting as a stiffener at its core. The asphalt seal at the bottom was to make the container airtight and moisture-proof, preserving the precious text inside. This was not a laboratory apparatus, but a library storage vessel. The mystery of the Baghdad Battery is a perfect case study in how science solves ancient puzzles. It does not simply accept the most exciting explanation. It asks for the full evidence, examines the materials, and insists on a theory that fits all the facts, not just the alluring ones. The spark of imagination is vital, but it must be grounded in the sober light of chemistry, archaeology, and common sense. A library's clay scroll case held no electrical spark, but another artifact promised a power far more mystical. The crystal skulls have captivated imaginations for over a century, particularly the most famous, the Mitchell Hedges skull, named for the adventurer who claimed his daughter discovered it beneath a Mayan altar in Belize in the 1920s. Carved from a single block of flawless, transparent quartz, its jaw detachable, it was hailed as a masterpiece of lost ancient technology, a relic of Atlantis or a tool of Mayan priests with psychic properties. Other skulls surfaced in collections, each with its own enigmatic provenance, suggesting a tradition of impossible craftsmanship. How could pre-Columbian artisans without metal tools sculpt the hardest known natural substance with such perfection, leaving no scratch marks? The answer arrived not from psychic intuition, but from a microscope's cold, unblinking eye. Scientists subjected the skulls to the most rigorous forensic examination possible. Using scanning electron microscopy, which magnifies surfaces thousands of times, they searched for the telltale signature of the maker's tools. Ancient lapidary work, shaping stone by hand, leaves irregular, multidirectional scratches from abrasive sand and hand-powered drills. What the microscope revealed on the Mitchell Hedges skull and its counterparts was a pattern of perfectly parallel, curved grooves. These were the unmistakable fingerprints of high-speed, modern rotary wheels, tools equipped with diamond or carborundum abrasives that did not exist before the 19th century. The next clue came from the stone itself. Advanced spectroscopic analysis, which reads the unique chemical fingerprint of minerals, examined the quartz's trace elements and impurities. The crystal's signature did not match known Mesoamerican sources. Instead, its composition pointed squarely to the quartz-rich mines of Brazil, a region that became a major exporter of such material only in the 1800s. The final, definitive evidence was contextual. Not a single crystal skull has ever been documented in a legitimate, professionally excavated archaeological site in the Americas. They all appear mysteriously in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a period of intense public fascination with spiritualism, lost civilizations, and lucrative artifact markets. The scientific verdict is unanimous and clear. The crystal skulls are exquisite fakes, masterpieces of 19th century European gem-cutting artistry, likely created to feed the growing demand for exotic antiquities. They are not windows into an Atlantean past, but brilliant reflections of their own Victorian present, a time when mystery could be manufactured and sold, waiting for a future science to see through the flawless crystal to the modern marks left behind. A perfect crystal skull reveals a modern forgery, but a faded parchment chart seems to offer impossible knowledge from the past. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul rests a fragment of a world map drawn on gazelle skin in 1513. It bears the signature of an Ottoman admiral, Piri Reis, and it is breathtakingly accurate for its time, depicting the Atlantic with the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the eastern bulge of Brazil. But it is the landmass at the bottom that has ignited a century of wild speculation. Below South America, the map shows a rough, continuous coastline stretching eastward. To many enthusiasts, this is not a mistake. It is the northern shore of Antarctica, depicted hundreds of years before its official discovery, and crucially, shown without its mile-thick ice cap. The implications are staggering. It suggests the mapmaker had access to ancient sources from a time, perhaps thousands of years ago, when Antarctica was warm and mapped by a lost, advanced civilization, or even by visitors from beyond Earth. The mystery hinges on a single, dramatic claim that the Piri Reis map shows Antarctica ice-free. But does the science of the map and the science of the ice support this? The first step is to listen to the mapmaker himself. In extensive notes written on the map, Admiral Piri Reis is remarkably candid about his sources. He states clearly that he compiled this chart from 20 older maps, including 8 from the time of Alexander the Great, 4 Portuguese, 1 Arabic, and 1 that he specifically says came from Christopher Columbus. This is not a claim to original surveying, but to scholarly compilation. Cartographic historians comparing the shapes on the Piri Reis fragment to other maps of the era can see the direct influences. The coastline of Brazil closely matches Portuguese charts from the early 1500s. The Atlantic islands are drawn from Arabic sailing guides. The controversial southern land, however, fits perfectly within a different tradition, the long-held cartographic belief in a great southern continent, or Terra Australis. For centuries, European mapmakers, believing the southern hemisphere must have a large landmass to balance the north, routinely sketched a vast, unknown continent at the bottom of their world maps. It was conjecture, not survey. So what is that coastline on the Piri Reis map? Glaciologists provide the definitive physical evidence. Antarctica has been covered in a continental ice sheet for at least 15 million years. The idea that humans, even tens of thousands of years ago, could have mapped its subglacial topography is a geological impossibility. The rock bedrock beneath the ice is nothing like the smooth coastline drawn on the parchment. More tellingly, when you detach the speculative southern land from the Piri Reis map and compare it not to Antarctica, but to the continuing coastline of South America, a compelling match emerges. Many scholars argue the landmass is simply a distorted, repeated plotting of the Argentine coast, a common error when piecing together multiple, conflicting reports from early explorers. The map is a magnificent historical document, a snapshot of a world in transition, where hard-won Portuguese navigational data mingled with classical legend and hopeful guesswork. It is not a window into a pre-glacial world, but a mirror reflecting the limits and ambitions of early 16th century geography. The real mystery it solves is not about ancient astronauts, but about the human hunger to fill blank spaces on the map, even if we must sometimes sketch the details with our imagination. That human hunger to fill blank spaces extends to the vast, empty ocean, where one of the most isolated places on Earth holds a silent army of giants. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is a speck of volcanic rock in the Pacific, over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. Scattered across its windswept landscape are nearly 900 massive stone statues, the moai. These brooding figures, some standing over 30 feet tall and weighing more than 80 tons, were carved from a single quarry and then transported miles across rugged terrain to ceremonial platforms called ahu. For generations, their existence posed a seemingly impossible question. How could a small, pre-industrial Polynesian society with no wheels, no metal, and no large animals possibly have moved these colossal blocks? The mystery was so profound it fueled the darkest of theories, that the island was an outpost of Atlantis, or that extraterrestrial engineers provided the necessary technology. The most persistent narrative, however, was one of ecological suicide, a cautionary tale where the Rapa Nui people, obsessed with statue building, deforested their island into a barren wasteland, collapsing their own civilization in a frenzy of pointless megalithic competition. It was a story of self-destruction with the fallen moai as grim tombstones, but modern archaeology and a series of bold, hands-on experiments have rewritten this entire story, revealing not a tale of madness, but one of breathtaking human ingenuity and cooperation. The first clue came from the roads themselves. Archaeologists surveying the ancient transport routes leading from the quarry found not deep, worn ruts from sledges, but a network of roads with a curious feature. Many of the fallen moai along these paths were found face down, with their long, sloping bases pointing uphill. This odd, consistent orientation was a critical piece of evidence. It suggested the statues were not dragged horizontally, but moved in an upright position. This aligned perfectly with something long overlooked, the island's own oral traditions. Rapa Nui elders had passed down stories for centuries describing the moai as walking to their ahu, guided by the mana or spiritual power of chiefs and priests. Western scholars had dismissed this as pure myth. What if it was a literal description of the method? A team of researchers, including archaeologists and engineers, decided to test the walking hypothesis in the most direct way possible. They would build a concrete replica of a moai and try to move it using only materials and manpower available to the ancient islanders. Their experiment, documented for the world to see, was a revelation. By attaching 3 thick ropes to the statue, one on each side and one to the front, a team of just 18 people could make the multi-ton figure walk. The technique was a coordinated rocking motion. Teams on the side ropes would pull, rocking the statue forward onto one corner of its base. As it tilted, the front team would pull to guide the step forward, then the process would repeat on the other side. With a rhythmic chant to keep time, the massive block could be walked across the landscape in a controlled, upright gait, covering hundreds of yards in a day. This method explained the fallen statues perfectly. A misstep or a snapped rope during the walk would cause the moai to fall forward, exactly as they were found on the roads. Tool mark analysis on the statues' bases provided further proof, showing distinctive chipping patterns consistent with the impacts of repeated rocking and stepping, not dragging. The experiment solved the how, but it also transformed the why. This was not the work of a desperate, collapsing society. Moving an 80-ton moai in this way required precise engineering, impeccable teamwork, and sophisticated social organization. It was a communal act of profound spiritual and political significance, a unifying project that demonstrated the strength and coordination of the entire community. The ecological story has been revised as well, with newer evidence suggesting deforestation was a complex process involving introduced rats and climate change, not just statue transport. The real mystery of Easter Island was never about aliens or self-destruction. It was a failure of our own imagination, an inability to believe that ancient people, working together with nothing but ropes, rhythm, and incredible skill, could make giants walk. The giants of Easter Island walked on dry land, but another treasure lies hidden beneath the arid soil of a different desert. Among the famed Dead Sea Scrolls, a collection of ancient Jewish texts discovered in clay jars, one document stands utterly apart. It is not written on fragile parchment or papyrus. It is etched into thin sheets of corroded green metal, the Copper Scroll. Unlike its neighbors filled with biblical texts and community rules, this scroll contains a straightforward, breathtaking list, an inventory of 64 hiding places for a staggering fortune. It describes tons of gold and silver, along with precious incense and scrolls, buried in caves, cisterns, and tombs around the region of Jerusalem. The quantities are not spiritual metaphors, they are specific weights, talents of precious metal, a hoard that would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars today. From the moment it was found in 1952, the central mystery was agonizingly simple. Was this a literal treasure map or a work of religious allegory? The sheer scale of the treasure seemed fantastical, more like a legend than a ledger. Could any group have amassed and hidden such wealth? Scholars were sharply divided. Some argued it was a record of the vast temple treasury, hidden before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Others believed it was purely symbolic, a coded text describing spiritual riches, not physical ones. The scroll itself, brittle and corroded shut, held its secrets tightly for years. The first scientific intervention was a physical one, just to read it. The copper was too oxidized and fragile to unroll by conventional means. In 1955, researchers at the University of Manchester made a daring decision. They carefully cut the scroll into 23 separate strips along the lines of its engraved text. This allowed them to flatten the pieces and finally transcribe the strange, colloquial Hebrew. But the words alone could not settle the debate. To understand the scroll's true nature, scientists turned to the metal itself. Material analysis became the key. Using techniques like X-ray fluorescence, they examined the scroll's composition. It was confirmed to be nearly pure copper, with trace elements that matched known sources from the ancient Levant. More importantly, they studied the patina, the layer of corrosion that had built up over the centuries. The specific minerals in this green crust, like malachite and cuprite, formed under natural conditions over a very long period. This corrosion pattern was consistent with the scroll having lain in a desert cave for roughly 2,000 years, perfectly aligning with the age of the other Dead Sea Scrolls. It was not a medieval forgery or a later creation, it was genuinely ancient. This finding was critical. It confirmed the scroll was a real artifact from the time it claimed to describe. But did that make the treasure real? The language of the text itself offers compelling clues. The instructions are frustratingly vague to a modern seeker, but they are strikingly practical for someone who knew the landscape 2 millennia ago. It describes features like a ruined aqueduct, a specific dam, a tomb with a double entrance, and measurements in cubits. These are not poetic allusions, they are surveying notes. This pragmatic tone strongly suggests the scroll was meant as a functional recovery document, a backup record for people who intended to retrieve the hoard. So where is it? The treasure has never been found, leading many to assume it was looted in antiquity, perhaps by the Romans who systematically plundered the region. Yet modern science has not given up the search. Teams have used geological surveys, satellite imagery, and ground-penetrating radar to scan areas around the Qumran region and the Judean desert, matching the scroll's descriptions to known archaeological sites and cave systems. While no ton of gold has emerged, this work has dramatically narrowed the plausible zones, ruling out vast swaths of land and focusing attention on specific, complex cave networks that have yet to be fully explored. The Copper Scroll endures as a unique paradox, a document whose physical reality is confirmed by chemistry, but whose promised bounty remains a ghost in the hills. It stands as a testament not to myth, but to a very human moment of crisis when someone, facing an unimaginable threat, took the time to carefully etch a list of what they hoped to save, pressing their stylus into soft metal to make a record they believed would outlast the chaos. The treasure may be gone, but that desperate act of preservation is the real discovery. From a desperate list of lost treasure, we turn to a face contorted in silent agony. In the dim vaults of museums and tombs, a handful of mummies from Egypt and beyond present a visage that chills the blood. Their mouths are wrenched open, jaws unhinged, facial muscles taut in a perfect, eternal scream. The most famous is Unknown Man E from the Deir el-Bahari cache, a mummy so violently posed with limbs splayed and face locked in horror that early discoverers were convinced they had found a victim of murder, perhaps even buried alive as punishment. These screaming mummies seem to be direct witnesses to unspeakable terror, their final moments frozen by the embalmer's art. The immediate theories were dark and dramatic, tales of poisoning, suffocation, or live entombment. But what if the scream is not a message from the moment of death, but a much later artifact of the mummification process itself? Forensic pathology and modern medical imaging have stepped into the tomb to diagnose these ancient patients. The first step is a virtual autopsy. Using computed tomography scans, scientists can examine the mummified body layer by layer without disturbing a single linen bandage. They look for trauma, broken bones, or tissue damage that might indicate a violent death. In many of these screaming mummies, including Unknown Man E, the scans reveal no such evidence. There are no crushed hyoid bones from strangulation, no stab wounds to the heart or lungs, no signs of poison that would cause such a specific muscular spasm. The body is otherwise intact. This absence of trauma points away from murder and toward a more mundane biological explanation. The key lies in understanding the complex process of decomposition and mummification. After death, the body's muscles undergo rigor mortis, a stiffening caused by chemical changes. This passes, and then comes a phase where ligaments and tendons can contract as they dry, a process influenced by heat and the environment. For a mummy prepared in the hot, dry Egyptian desert, or one subjected to the natural drying of a salt cave, this desiccation happens rapidly. If the head was positioned tilted back during the initial stages, the muscles and ligaments of the neck and jaw could contract powerfully as they lost moisture, pulling the mouth agape. This effect could be dramatically accentuated by the burial wrappings themselves. As the linen bandages dried and shrank over centuries, they could place uneven pressure on the body, further distorting the posture and facial features. A jaw that was loosely closed at burial might be pulled decisively open by the contracting textiles. In some cases, however, the scream is indeed a genuine reflection of a painful death, but not necessarily a violent one. Modern pathology identifies specific diseases that can cause extreme facial contortion. Tetanus, known as lockjaw, produces powerful, involuntary muscle spasms that can force the mouth into a rigid grimace. Severe poisoning from certain plant alkaloids or strychnine can cause similar horrific muscle contractions. Mummies showing these expressions may have died in tremendous pain from illness or toxin, their faces locked in that final spasm before the embalmers ever began their work. The mystery of the screaming mummy is a powerful lesson in forensic archaeology. It teaches us to separate the theatrical appearance from the physical evidence. By applying the calm, analytical tools of medical science, we hear not a scream of murder, but the subtle, post-mortem whisper of shrinking muscle and drying linen, or the tragic signature of an ancient disease. The face of horror becomes, upon closer inspection, a mask shaped by time, chemistry, and the inescapable biology of death itself. The silent scream of a mummy gives way to the frantic scratch of a quill in a lonely cell. Within the vaults of the National Library of Sweden rests a book that seems to defy the very limits of human endurance. The Codex Gigas, better known as the Devil's Bible, is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world. It stands nearly 3 feet tall, 20 inches wide, and almost 9 inches thick, bound in wooden boards covered with leather. Its pages, made from the skins of about 160 donkeys, contain the complete Latin Vulgate Bible, historical chronicles, medical texts, and a host of other works. But its most infamous feature is a full-page, chilling illustration of the devil himself, a horned green monster alone in a blank landscape. The legend that grew around it was as massive as the book. A monk condemned to be walled up alive for breaking his vows struck a desperate bargain. He promised to create a book containing all human knowledge in a single night, a task only possible with the help of Satan. As dawn broke, the book was complete, and the monk, in gratitude, added the portrait of his infernal benefactor. For centuries, this tale explained the impossible, a unified work of staggering scale penned by one man. The sheer physical and mental effort required seemed superhuman. Was this tome truly a diabolical contract made manifest, or could something more ordinary, yet equally profound, lie behind its creation? Modern scholars approach the Codex Gigas not as a relic of the occult, but as a forensic document. The first clue was in the handwriting itself. Paleographers, experts in ancient script, conducted a meticulous analysis of every letter on all 620 pages. They looked for the subtle tells that differentiate one scribe from another, the unique pressure of a pen stroke, the specific shape of a letter's serif, the rhythm and spacing of the lines. What they found was astonishing consistency. From the first page to the last, through the Bible, the Chronicles, and the encyclopedic entries, the handwriting maintained the same distinctive character. There were no shifts in style, no variations in skill level that would indicate multiple authors taking turns over decades. This was the work of a single, remarkably disciplined hand. The next layer of evidence came from the materials. Analysis of the ink composition across the manuscript showed no significant variation. The scribe used a consistent iron gall ink recipe throughout. Furthermore, scientists studying the wear patterns on the pages and the binding noted a uniformity that suggested the book was written in a relatively concentrated period, not picked up and put down sporadically over a lifetime. The vellum pages were prepared in a uniform batch, and the entire volume was planned as a single, monumental project. So how long would such a task actually take? Historians cross-referenced the paleographic data with records of medieval scribble work. A professional copyist working full-time under monastic conditions could produce about 100 lines of text per day. The Codex Gigas contains over 3 million characters, factoring in the time for preparing the vellum, ruling the lines, creating the elaborate initials, and that infamous full-page devil illustration. The math points to a minimum of 20 to 30 years of dedicated, solitary labor. This timeline shatters the one-night myth, but it creates a new human mystery. Why would a single monk devote the bulk of his adult life to this one task? Historical context provides the likely answer. The book was created in the early 13th century at the Benedictine monastery of Podlages in Bohemia, a region often torn by political and religious strife. Such an immense, expensive project would have required the full support of the monastery, a massive investment of resources. It may have been commissioned as a prestige object to bring fame and pilgrims to a struggling house. For the scribe himself, it could have been a lifelong penance, a voluntary act of atonement so severe it became his life's purpose. Every stroke of the pen, every aching hour in the scriptorium was a step toward spiritual redemption. The terrifying devil on page 577, rather than a sign of a pact, was likely a standard medieval depiction of evil, a common feature in religious texts meant to warn the faithful. The real magic of the Codex Gigas is not diabolical but human. It is the story of unimaginable dedication, a testament to what one person can achieve with nothing but a quill, a pot of ink, and a will forged in faith or desperation. The devil did not write this book, a man did, and in doing so he left behind not a curse, but a monument to the sheer, staggering power of perseverance. A monument of perseverance stands in stark contrast to a simple tool encased in stone. In 1936, on a walk near London, Texas, a curious couple stumbled upon a loose piece of rock with something even more curious protruding from it, the weathered wooden handle of a hammer. When they cracked the stone open, they found the hammerhead still firmly embedded inside. The rock itself appeared ancient, and the immediate conclusion seemed inescapable. This was a modern tool impossibly trapped inside a prehistoric stone, a relic from a time when humans and dinosaurs walked the earth together. For decades, the London hammer, as it became known, was a flagship artifact for creationist museums, presented as definitive proof that conventional geology was wrong and that the earth was only a few thousand years old. The visual evidence was powerfully simple. How could a hammer from the 1800s be inside a rock that took millions of years to form? The mystery was a direct challenge to science itself. Geologists and chemists accepted that challenge not by dismissing the artifact, but by asking the most basic forensic question: what is this rock actually made of? The first step was a visual and mineralogical analysis. The encasing material was not a typical, solid sedimentary rock formed layer by layer over eons. It was a concretion. Concretions are hard, compact masses that form quite rapidly in geological terms when mineral cement precipitates and fills the spaces between sediment grains, often gathering around a nucleus like a fossil, a shell, or in this case, a lost hammer. They can form in a matter of decades or centuries, not millennia. The specific composition was key. X-ray diffraction and chemical tests identified the concretion as a type of limestone rich in calcite. This mineral readily precipitates from mineral-rich groundwater, especially in the specific environmental conditions found in the region around London, Texas, where such formations are common. The process is well understood. Water percolating through the soil dissolves calcium carbonate from the surrounding bedrock. When that water encounters an object like an iron hammerhead, the chemistry changes, often triggered by the iron itself, and the dissolved minerals rapidly crystallize out, encasing the object in a stony shell. The concretion around the London hammer showed all the classic signs of this quick formation, including a concentric, layered structure radiating from the hammerhead as the nucleus. Next, scientists examined the tool itself. Metallurgical analysis of the hammerhead revealed it was made of 19th century iron, with a specific forging pattern consistent with American tools from the late 1800s. The wooden handle, while mineralized on the outside where it contacted the concretion, was confirmed through microscopic analysis to be ordinary wood from a period-appropriate tree species, not some petrified ancient timber. The complete story, written in chemistry and sedimentology, is now clear. Sometime in the late 19th century, a miner or prospector in the area lost his hammer. It fell into a crevice or was left in a moist, mineral-rich environment. Over the following decades, the local groundwater, saturated with dissolved calcite, began depositing layers of limestone around the iron object. Within 100 years or so, the hammer was fully encased in a hard, stone-like nodule. Erosion then exposed the concretion, leading to its discovery in the 1930s. The London hammer is not an anomaly that breaks the rules of geology. It is a perfect demonstration of one of its most fascinating and surprisingly swift natural processes. The mystery was solved not by debating timelines, but by simply analyzing the materials, revealing a hammer from the age of railroads, patiently wrapped in stone by the quiet chemistry of a Texas hillside. A hammer encased in stone by natural chemistry shows how the earth can create its own illusions, but in another desert, the stones themselves seem to come alive. On the flat, cracked surface of the racetrack playa in Death Valley, California, the ground tells a strange story. Scattered across this ancient lake bed are hundreds of rocks, some weighing over 700 pounds. Behind them, stretching for hundreds of feet, are long, meandering trails gouged into the dry mud. These trails curve, zigzag, and even run parallel before suddenly stopping, as if the rocks had simply decided to go for a leisurely stroll and then changed their minds. With no human or animal tracks nearby, the phenomenon of the sailing stones presented a perfect modern geological mystery. How could massive boulders move themselves across a flat, dry desert floor? For over a century, the theories were as creative as they were desperate. Some suggested powerful, localized magnetic fields were pulling the rocks. Others whispered of supernatural forces or alien pranksters. More grounded guesses involved dust devils or hurricane-force winds, yet the heaviest stones would have required winds far stronger than any ever recorded in that valley to budge them. The rocks held their secret tightly because no one had ever seen them move. The mystery demanded a witness. In 2011, a team of scientists launched a multi-pronged assault on the problem, treating the playa like a crime scene. They selected individual stones and fitted them with custom, solar-powered GPS units that could log their position every few seconds. They also installed a weather station and set up a series of time-lapse cameras around the playa, programmed to capture an image every few minutes, day and night, for months on end. Then they waited. The breakthrough came during the winter of 2013. The time-lapse cameras captured it all. The process began with a rare, perfect recipe of conditions. First, a modest rain fell on the playa, just enough to create a shallow, temporary pond a few inches deep. Then, as clear winter nights brought freezing temperatures, a thin sheet of windowpane ice formed on the water's surface. The next morning, under the desert sun, the ice began to melt and break up into large, floating panels. Now came the final, crucial ingredient, a steady, gentle wind, blowing across the playa at speeds of only about 10 miles per hour. This wind caught the edges of the floating ice sheets. As these large, thin panes of ice drifted, they pushed against any rocks that were partially submerged or sitting in their path. With the playa's mud now slick and lubricated by the water, the immense friction that usually held the rocks in place vanished. The ice, driven by the wind, exerted just enough persistent pressure to set the massive stones in motion, sliding them across the soft bed at speeds slower than a crawling snail, often just a few inches per minute. The GPS data confirmed the slow, graceful journeys, sometimes lasting for several minutes, sometimes for hours. The elegant trails were not carved by the rocks dragging, but by the rocks being pushed, their leading edges plowing a furrow in the soft mud as they inched along. When the water evaporated and the mud dried, the trails were baked into permanence, a frozen record of that brief, magical interplay of ice, water, wind, and stone. The solution was not a force from beyond, but a delicate, ephemeral ballet of ordinary elements. A secret performance that only happened when no one was looking, until science decided to watch. France's northwestern coast holds a forest of stone that seems to defy the very idea of time. At Karnak, over 3,000 weathered megaliths stand in eerie, precise rows stretching for miles across the countryside. For centuries, these silent sentinels invited grand speculation. Were they a colossal astronomical computer, their lines pointing to solstice sunrises? Perhaps they were a defensive formation turned to stone by a sorcerer, as local legend claimed. Some even theorized they were a primitive seismic network, their deep foundations acting as detectors for earthquakes. The sheer scale of the site demanded an explanation to match its grandeur. The truth, uncovered through patient, earthbound science, is more about human society than celestial mechanics. Archaeologists began by mapping every single stone with laser scanners and drone photography, creating a digital twin of the entire complex. This allowed for statistical analysis of the alignments on a scale never before possible. While a few rows do show potential lunar alignments, the patterns were not consistent enough to support a unified astronomical observatory theory. The stones were not a Neolithic planetarium. The real breakthrough came from looking not at the sky but beneath the soil. Systematic excavation around and beneath the stone rows revealed a landscape of the dead. Researchers found burial mounds, dolmens, and fragments of human bone and grave goods dating from different periods across thousands of years. The stones were not a single project but a cumulative one, built and rearranged by farming communities over more than 2 millennia. Chemical analysis of the soil and pollen records painted a picture of the world these builders inhabited. As early societies transitioned from nomadic hunting to settled agriculture, land became a permanent, vital resource. The most compelling theory to emerge is that the Karnak alignments were monumental territorial markers, denoting clanlands, ceremonial pathways, and sacred burial grounds. The rows may have physically guided processions for funeral rites, connecting the domains of the living with the permanent homes of the ancestral dead. Some of the taller stones likely represented powerful lineage founders watching over their descendants. The mystery of Karnak is solved not by a single dramatic revelation, but by a mosaic of humble evidence, bone fragments, pollen grains, and the subtle tilt of a stone. It reveals a people not obsessed with the stars, but deeply concerned with belonging, using the most permanent material they knew to root themselves to the earth and to their past, creating a forest of stone to remember where they came from and to mark the ground that was now theirs. Their stone forest marked a territory of ancestors, but a warrior's true territory was defined by the blade in his hand. Across the graves and battlefields of Viking Age Europe from the 9th to the 11th centuries, a certain type of sword commanded awe and fear. They were not ordinary weapons. These blades were lighter, stronger, more flexible, and held a sharper edge than any other sword of their time. And along their central ridge, inlaid with iron and silver, was a name, a maker's mark that became a legend, +ULFBERHT+. To own an Ulfbert was to wield a piece of magic, a technological marvel that seemed to have fallen from the future. The mystery was absolute. How could Viking smiths, working in smoky forges with local bog iron, produce steel of such legendary quality? The secret was not in their technique, but in the material itself. For centuries, the origin of the Ulfbert steel was one of history's great puzzles. The answer would not be found in a saga, but in the atomic signature of the metal. Modern metallurgists took samples from the few dozen genuine Ulfbert swords known to exist and placed them under the gaze of a spectrometer. This instrument does not just look at metal, it listens to its composition. By exciting the atoms and measuring the light they emit, scientists can detect trace elements with incredible precision. The results were a shock. The Ulfbert steel was not just good iron, it was a specific type known as crucible steel. Its carbon content was high and evenly distributed, around 1.5%, and it contained almost no slag, the brittle impurities that made contemporary blades prone to shattering. This was a clean, homogeneous steel, the product of a sophisticated manufacturing process where iron was melted in a sealed clay crucible at extremely high temperatures, allowing impurities to separate and carbon to integrate uniformly. This technology did not exist in Viking Age Scandinavia. So where did it come from? The spectroscopic fingerprint provided a map. The specific pattern of trace elements in the Ulfbert blades matched known sources of crucible steel being produced at the time in the Islamic world, in regions like modern-day Iran and Central Asia. This was the steel of Damascus blades, famed for their strength and distinctive watery pattern. Now the story rewrites itself. the Vikings were not just raiders, they were the supreme middlemen of the medieval world. Their riverine trade networks, particularly along the Volga, stretched deep into the lands of the Khazars and Bulgars, connecting the frozen north to the caliphates of the south. They traded furs, amber, and slaves for silver, silks, and this miraculous material, ingots of pure crucible steel. And Ulfbert Smith, likely based in the Rhineland where many of the swords have been found, was not a wizard. He was a master importer and craftsman. He acquired these precious steel ingots perhaps through trade networks reaching up from the Black Sea, and forged them into blades, stamping them with his renowned trademark, a brand name that guaranteed supreme quality. The inscription itself was a mark of elite commerce, not just craftsmanship. The mystery of the Ulfbert swords dissolves into a revelation about the medieval world. It was far more connected than we ever imagined. A blade wielded by a Norse chieftain in a Norwegian fjord began its life as raw ore in Persia, was refined in a crucible in Baghdad, traveled thousands of miles on the backs of camels and in the hulls of riverboats, and was finally hammered into legendary form in a European workshop. The Ulfbert is more than a weapon. It is a physical ledger of global trade, proving that even in the so-called Dark Ages, the world was linked by strands of commerce, with Vikings as the daring threads that pulled advanced technology from one edge of the earth to the other. A blade forged from Persian steel speaks of a connected world, but another Norse community found itself fatally disconnected. On the remote western coast of Greenland, for nearly 500 years, two settlements of Viking colonists not only survived, they thrived. They built stone churches with imported stained glass, raised cattle on lush pastures, and traded walrus ivory and polar bear skins for European iron and timber. Their world was a marvel of medieval adaptation, and then, by the middle of the 15th century, it was gone. The eastern and western settlements, home to perhaps 2,000 Norse souls at their peak, fell silent. When European ships finally returned centuries later, they found only empty stone ruins, the final chapter of a society erased. For generations, the mystery invited dramatic theories. Did the Inuit who shared the island wipe them out in a forgotten war? Did they simply pack up and sail back to Iceland, defeated by the harsh environment? Or did they slowly starve to death, victims of their own stubbornness? The answer, unearthed from the ice and the soil, is a profound lesson in the fragility of even the most established societies. Modern science has pieced together their final centuries not from sagas, but from two key sources: climate proxies and kitchen middens, their garbage heaps. The first witness is the ice itself. Scientists drilling deep ice cores from the Greenland ice sheet can read the ancient atmosphere like a history book. Tiny air bubbles trapped in the ice reveal past temperatures, and layers of dust and sea salt indicate storminess and sea ice extent. This data paints a stark picture. Beginning in the 13th century, the climate began to cool, a shift that would intensify into what we now call the Little Ice Age. Summers grew shorter and cooler by a critical degree or two. That small change had a massive impact. It shortened the already precarious growing season for grass, the lifeblood of their cattle-based economy. At the same time, the increase in sea ice made the vital shipping routes to Iceland and Norway more dangerous and unpredictable, strangling their lifeline to the European goods and social connections they depended upon. The Norse were slowly being trapped both by climate and by their own cultural identity. This is where the archaeology of their trash becomes heartbreakingly eloquent. Researchers sifting through centuries of discarded bones at settlement sites can trace a society's diet with incredible precision. In the early, prosperous years, the bone waste is overwhelmingly from domesticated animals, cows, sheep, and goats, with a small amount of wild seal and fish. This is the diet of European farmers clinging to their pastoral identity. But as the layers progress through the 14th and 15th centuries, a telling shift occurs. The percentage of wild seal, whale, and fish bones increases dramatically. They were turning to the sea to survive. Yet, crucially, the bones of their prized cattle never disappear entirely, and the tools for deep water fishing or hunting the abundant ringed seal from kayaks, skills mastered by the Inuit, are almost entirely absent from Norse sites. Here lies the core of the tragedy. The evidence shows they recognized the crisis. They tried to adapt by hunting more, but they did so inefficiently from the shore or from their boats, not adopting the superior, specialized technologies of their Inuit neighbors. Their cultural identity as Christian, cattle-herding Europeans seems to have created a fatal barrier. To fully embrace the marine hunting lifestyle would have meant becoming something other than Norse. The final layers of the middens tell the grim conclusion. The bones show increasing signs of malnutrition and disease in the livestock. Human bones from late-period graves reveal stunted growth, anemia, and signs of severe nutritional stress. The society didn't vanish in a sudden catastrophe. It withered, malnourished, isolated, and unable to fully transform. The population slowly declined through a combination of starvation, infant mortality, and emigration. The last few survivors likely boarded a boat for Iceland, leaving their stone churches to the wind and their story to the ice. The Greenland Norse did not fall to a mysterious plague or a lost war. They were defeated by a cooling world and an invisible yet immovable wall of their own making, a lesson written in vertebrae and ice cores about the price of failing to change. The collapse of a Norse colony was a slow, silent tragedy, but another European community erupted into a spectacle of frantic public agony. In the sweltering July heat of 1518, on a street in Strasbourg, a woman named Frau Trophea began to dance. There was no music, no celebration. Her movements were jerky, compulsive, and utterly unstoppable. She danced until her feet bled, until she collapsed from exhaustion, only to rise and dance again. Within a week, dozens had joined her. Within a month, the crowd of involuntary dancers had swelled to over 400 people, their limbs flailing in a desperate, days-long marathon. Authorities, believing the dancers needed to sweat out a demonic influence, built a stage, hired musicians, and encouraged more dancing, a prescription that only fueled the epidemic. People danced until they dropped from heart attacks, strokes, or sheer physical collapse. This was the dancing plague, and for centuries it stood as one of history's most baffling medical mysteries. Was it a literal poison in the bread or a poison of the mind? The most famous physical suspect is ergot, a fungus that grows on damp rye and contains chemicals similar to LSD, which can cause hallucinations and convulsions. Could a batch of tainted grain have sent an entire city into a psychedelic frenzy? Toxicologists and medical historians have scrutinized the historical accounts, and the symptoms simply do not align. Ergotism, also called St. Anthony's fire, causes agonizing burning sensations in the limbs, gangrene, and violent muscle contractions, not the coordinated, sustained dancing described by witnesses. The dancers were reported as being in a trance, but they were not hallucinating or suffering from the characteristic tissue death of ergot poisoning. Furthermore, the outbreak was too localized and selective, not affecting entire families who would have eaten from the same loaf. The physical poison theory crumbles under scrutiny. So what force could compel a body to dance itself to death? Modern medicine points to a powerful, non-physical catalyst, a psychogenic or mass sociogenic illness. This is not a disease spread by germs, but by shared psychological trauma. To understand it, you must feel the atmosphere of Strasbourg in 1518. The city was a pressure cooker of despair. Several years of brutal famine had left the population malnourished and weak. A devastating outbreak of syphilis, known as the French disease, was spreading terror. Poverty was rampant. In this superstitious, deeply religious society, such suffering was widely seen as divine punishment. The collective psyche was primed for a release, a physical manifestation of the community's overwhelming fear and guilt. When Frau Trophia, likely suffering from a personal stress-induced breakdown, began her solitary dance, she provided a script. In a culture that believed deeply in curses, demons, and saintly intercession, her behavior was not seen as madness but as a contagious spiritual affliction. For others, gripped by the same anxieties, joining the dance may have felt like the only available expression of their torment, a way to participate in a communal penance or a desperate bid for catharsis. The authorities' disastrous response, making it a public spectacle, only validated the behavior and intensified the social contagion. Psychology solves the mystery by reframing it. The dancers were not poisoned or possessed, they were literally sick with stress. Their bodies, overloaded by fear and helplessness, translated that psychic pain into the only violent, all-consuming physical action their culture would understand as a form of spiritual crisis. The dancing plague was not a biological epidemic but a societal fever dream, a terrifying symptom of a community breaking under the weight of its own suffering, finally diagnosed not by a test for toxins but by an understanding of the human mind under siege. A community dancing itself to death reveals the power of collective psychology, but our final mystery trades psychic pressure for a literal pressure drop over a patch of ocean. The Bermuda Triangle, a region loosely bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, has become the ultimate modern legend of the unexplained. Its reputation is built on chilling, dramatic narratives. Flight 19, a squadron of 5 U.S. Navy Avenger bombers that vanished without a trace during a routine training mission in 1945. The SS Cyclops, a massive Navy cargo ship that disappeared with over 300 souls in 1918, and countless private vessels and aircraft allegedly swallowed by the sea. Calm, clear skies, the stories suggest a place where the normal laws of physics and navigation break down, a zone of alien abductions, time warps, or the lost technology of Atlantis. It is presented as an ancient mystery, though its legend is purely 20th century. But when science and cold statistics are applied to this hot zone of speculation, the fog of myth dissipates almost completely. The first layer of the solution is environmental. The Bermuda Triangle is not a placid lagoon, it is a dynamic and often treacherous stretch of ocean. It sits squarely in the path of the mighty Gulf Stream, a powerful, warm, and fast-moving current that can rapidly sweep away debris from a disaster site, erasing physical evidence within hours. The area is also prone to sudden, violent local weather. The term sudden local storm is not an exaggeration here. Scientists have documented the phenomenon of hexagonal clouds, which can generate microbursts of wind descending at over 100 miles per hour, capable of generating waves over 45 feet tall in minutes. These wind bombs can easily capsize even large vessels before a distress call is fully transmitted. Furthermore, the region is a hotspot for methane hydrates, deposits of gas trapped in the seabed. While a massive, spontaneous release is geologically unlikely, the theory that such a bubble could reduce water density and cause a ship to sink instantly has been demonstrated in controlled experiments, offering at least one plausible, if rare, physical mechanism for a sudden loss. Yet the most compelling debunking comes not from oceanography, but from actuarial tables and simple human fallibility. The key question is one of baseline statistics. Does the Bermuda Triangle actually have a higher rate of disappearances than any other similarly trafficked part of the ocean? The definitive answer from both the United States Coast Guard and Lloyd's of London, the world's foremost maritime insurer, is a resounding no. Lloyd's of London does not charge higher premiums for vessels passing through the triangle because their loss data shows it is no more dangerous than any other major shipping route. The United States Coast Guard has stated repeatedly that the combination of environmental factors and heavy traffic in the area fully accounts for the number of incidents which are not statistically abnormal. The legend is a product of confirmation bias. Author Vincent Gaddis coined the term Bermuda Triangle in a 1964 magazine article, and subsequent writers like Charles Berlitz selectively compiled disappearances while ignoring the context, such as the fact that the SS Cyclops was notoriously overloaded and sailing in wartime, or that the pilots of Flight 19 were inexperienced, disoriented, and flying into a storm. Their compasses failed. The area is one of the most heavily traveled in the world for both pleasure craft and commercial shipping. With such high volume, a certain number of accidents, often due to mechanical failure, human error, or severe weather, are mathematically inevitable. The mystery is solved by recognizing that we have created a narrative pattern where none exists, connecting unrelated tragedies across decades with a sinister label. The Bermuda Triangle endures not as a scientific enigma, but as a cultural artifact, a testament to our enduring need for a map edge where the unknown still lingers, even when the data tells us the charts are, in fact, complete. From cursed triangles to dancing plagues, this journey through 25 ancient mysteries reveals a single, unifying truth. The greatest detective in history is not a person, but a process, the scientific method. Archaeology, forensics, chemistry, and physics have become our time machines, not to rewrite the past, but to listen to it. Where we once saw ghosts, we now see geology. Where we heard demonic pacts, we diagnose mass psychogenic illness. The crystal skulls were cut with Victorian wheels, the screaming mummy's face shaped by drying linen, and the stones of Karnak marked not celestial events but very human territory. Each solution, from the walking moai to the Viking steel trade, does something remarkable. It replaces wild speculation with evidence-based understanding, and in doing so, it grants the past a new kind of dignity. Science does not rob history of its wonder, it deepens it. Knowing that a single monk spent 30 years writing the Devil's Bible out of devotion or desperation is more awe-inspiring than any pact with Satan. Understanding that the Greenland Norse clung to their identity until the very end is a more profound human tragedy than any vague tale of vanishing. By demanding evidence, by testing hypotheses against the hard facts of chemistry and bone, science performs the ultimate act of respect. It takes our ancestors seriously. It assumes their lives, their technologies, and their struggles were real, complex, and ultimately knowable. The map is no longer filled with blank spaces labeled "Here be monsters." Instead, we see a landscape rich with human ingenuity, adaptation, and sometimes heartbreaking fallibility. The real magic is not in the mystery, but in the meticulous collective effort to solve it. So, what ancient puzzle captures your imagination? Was there a mystery from our list that changed how you see the past? Or is there another historical enigma you believe is crying out for a scientific investigation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation about our incredible past going. And if you enjoyed this journey from speculation to solution, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone else who loves a good mystery. Finally,